A terrifying darkness enveloped the house. When John returned from work and opened the door, he expected to see the familiar setting of his cozy bungalow. But instead, an entirely different world appeared before his eyes. The curtains he had bought in the summer were gone. The posters on the walls seemed unrecognizable, and the furniture looked as if no one had touched it for years. John walked further into the house and was overcome by a strange feeling, as if he had found himself on the set of a movie about his own childhood. He stepped onto the wooden floor, which no longer creaked after the renovation. Every corner of the house seemed familiar, yet at the same time completely foreign. A faint rustling sound came from the living room. John slowly turned and saw himself, but different, young, as if he had come back from the distant past. A guy of about 20 with all the features John remembered from his younger self. This is impossible, he thought. But there he was, just as he used to be. Young John, seeing his older double, jumped up in fright, but amazement quickly took over. They stood facing each other, separated by an invisible boundary of time. John didn't know what they should do, but their connection had already begun to form, like an invisible web weaving itself around them. Breaking the silence, the older John spoke, but instead of a reply, he heard something else, a cry from a child he didn't recognize coming from the next room. This was a family he had never known. And this was only the beginning of the strange discoveries awaiting him in this mysterious house. They looked at each other with surprise and awe. John saw before him his younger self, full of energy and hope, which he had once lost. The young double looked alarmed at first, but then his face gradually broke into a dazzling smile, as if he had met a long-lost friend. John, feeling slightly confused, thought, it can't be that his past had truly materialized before him. Taking a step forward, John felt his anxiety begin to give way to curiosity. He didn't know how to explain what he saw, but one thing was clear. This was no mere illusion. The young John, on the contrary, seemed bolder. Without hesitation, he stepped closer, reaching out his hand as if to check whether the person before him was real. Their fingers almost touched, and at that moment time seemed to stand still, filling the room with the sense that something incredible was happening. "Who are you?" the young John asked, his voice full of confusion, but also awe. Older John swallowed and simply replied, "The man you will one day become." This encounter felt surreal, but it was filled with a deep meaning that both of them intuitively understood. Suddenly, their attention was drawn by the sound of footsteps. Someone was approaching. A shadow flickered in the doorway, making them both flinch. A woman appeared from around the corner, carrying a child in her arms. She caught their gaze, and confusion showed on her face. Her appearance was like a catalyst. John suddenly realized that he had been drawn into an unfamiliar, yet somehow deeply personal play, where each new character brought with them a swarm of questions. But where exactly all this was leading, he still did not know. And this question burned inside him, awakening a desire to make sense of the confusing situation. The woman who entered the room looked stunned, but there was something in her eyes beyond mere surprise. It was something akin to recognition. She looked at John and the young man beside him, and John noticed how she held the child closer to herself. "Who are you?" The question sounded firm, but with a hint of anxiety. John, barely having time to grasp what was happening, tried to find the right words. I'm John," he managed to say, fully aware of how strange the situation was. But at that moment, the young John stepped forward, giving the woman an encouraging smile. He's my relative," he said, trying to dispel the growing tension. Her reaction surprised John. She seemed to waver between two worlds, the present and what she perhaps considered an illusion. "John?" She repeated the name, as if it held special meaning for her. Then she nodded, as if accepting the unbelievable. "My name is Alice," she introduced herself, briefly averting her gaze toward the images forming in her imagination. John felt his heart skip a beat as he studied her face, searching for any feature that might reveal how they were connected. The unfamiliar family surrounded him with their secrets, and he felt their past gradually beginning to intertwine with his own. John noticed a photo on the wall that seemed vaguely familiar, but something in the details didn't match. He realized that they might know more about him than he did himself. This discovery excited him and sparked even more questions. Ahead lay answers that could forever change his understanding of life. With every step through the house, John felt himself drawn by a strange force, and familiar scenes from the past began to bring long-forgotten fragments back to his memory. He saw a bookshelf where one book was out of place, stirring up special memories. It was a blue-covered diary he had kept during his teenage years. It was amazing how vividly long-forgotten thoughts and dreams he had written down in those distant days came back to him. When John opened the diary, scenes from his youth began to unfold before his eyes. On the pages were written his youthful experiences, dreams, and secrets he had once entrusted to paper. Each line awakened memories in him that seemed long forgotten. These entries were a key to his past, a hint at the life he once led. John kept turning the pages. His attention was captured by a note about a place he once wanted to visit, a deserted garden behind the house which he considered his refuge from the world. It was a place he had forgotten, but now it seemed to be calling him back. The entries also mentioned secret meetings with friends who would gather there to share dreams and make plans for the future. Forgotten memories began to come together, awakening long-lost feelings. These entries became a bridge between the past and the present, clues to unraveling how and why he ended up here. John realized that his journey was only just beginning, and ahead of him lay revelations that would completely change his understanding of life. But most importantly, he sensed that this house held even more secrets that he had yet to uncover. In search of the answer to the mystery of his return to the past, John slowly made his way to the basement, which seemed to beckon him with its ominous mystery. He remembered that in the old days, this place was always full of forgotten objects and memories. Opening the heavy door, he was met with the smell of old wood and dust, which inevitably reminded him of his childhood years. Deep in the basement, his eyes quickly adjusted to the dim light, revealing old cardboard boxes and shelves crammed with what seemed like forgotten memories. As he sorted through the items, John came across a box covered in a thick layer of dust. He carefully brushed it off and opened the lid, discovering various family heirlooms inside. Among them, his attention was drawn to a small but elegantly decorated chest with an intricate lock. On the lid of the chest, there was an inscription carved that he recognized immediately. It was the surname of his ancestors. John's heart began to beat faster, and without hesitation, he broke the lock open. Inside the chest, he found a collection of old photographs, letters, and documents. Several photographs stood out in particular, showing him and his younger self in front of a house that looked just like this one. John was stunned by what he saw. How could this be possible if he had never known this family? The letters, which he began to read by the dim light of his flashlight, revealed unexpected family secrets. They spoke of love, loss, and hopes that connected his ancestors to this house. Each new letter in the chest lifted the veil a little more on the mystery of the past. And John realized that this discovery was only the beginning of a journey toward a deeper understanding of his own story. Deep down, he felt that these findings might be the key to his return to the present. However, the question of what brought him here and how he could find his way back remained unanswered, compelling him to keep moving forward to understand the connection between the times. John, still unable to believe his eyes, couldn't tear himself away from the old chest bearing his ancestor's surname for a long time. Questions multiplied in his mind. How could it be that the house he had lived in so recently turned out to be hiding such secrets? Among the old letters and documents, his attention was drawn to a small diary, its cover already worn by time but still sturdy. Opening it, John read several pages where one of his ancestors described his life in this very house. The entries were surprisingly detailed. They spoke of the times when the house was just being built, of the hardships of life back then, and of plans for the future that were embraced with the same enthusiasm as his own dreams in his youth. The author of the diary wrote about the dream of creating something that could outlast centuries, passed down from generation to generation. John realized that this diary was not just a collection of personal notes, but a kind of guiding document that had led his family through the decades. Delving deeper into this chronicle, John began to find certain coincidences, descriptions of places and events that felt painfully familiar. After reading about the events that had taken place in this house, he realized that his own life was part of something much greater than he could have ever imagined. The diary, like a bridge, connected his personal story to a larger family epic, revealing details that had previously been hidden from him. And although the answers to all his questions were still out of reach, John felt that this discovery would become an important milestone in his journey toward unraveling the mystery. Under the veil of time, the diary revealed to him a truth he was ready to hear, allowing him to connect the facts of his own life with the entries in the diary. John began to see the chain of events that had led him here. Now he had to find out what role his ancestors played in this story, and how that might help him return to his own time. With each new discovery, he drew closer to understanding that the answers to his most important questions lay ahead. Still in shock from what he had learned about his family's history, John decided to delve deeper into what he had found in the basement. He felt that the diary of his ancestors, which he had already begun to study, contained more than just personal notes. The more he read, the clearer the connection between the past and the future became. On one of the pages, he came across a mention of a mysterious invention which, according to the entries, was meant to become a legacy for future generations. This invention was intended to be used for observing changes in time and space. The diary described a mechanism that was claimed to even be able to influence temporal contours. John, puzzled by this information, realized that what he had before him was not just a device but a key to unraveling the temporal anomaly he had encountered. The diary stated that the device was hidden somewhere within the house and only someone truly connected to the family would be able to find it. This was a real challenge, but John felt that if he could find it, he would be able to return to his own time. Following the clues from the diary, he began a thorough search of every corner of the house. His search led him to the old library, where it seemed that every book held its own secrets. Inspecting one of the shelves, John discovered a hidden compartment concealed behind rows of antique volumes. Overcoming his inner anxiety, he opened it and saw a small metal box. Inside was the device mentioned in the diary. Its design was complex, yet at the same time, it seemed surprisingly simple. Perhaps it was this very invention of his ancestors that had caused his journey through time. John's heart was pounding as he realized he was holding something incredible in his hands, a tool that might help him return to his own time and uncover all the secrets that had been hidden from him throughout his life. Now, all that remained was to figure out how to use it and what consequences it might bring. John was stunned by how his life had become intertwined across decades, as if by threads of an invisible web. He suddenly realized that the connection between times was not just a fantasy, it was a reality that crashed down on him along with the discoveries from the basement. He discovered that the events of the past and present were connected in a way he could not fully comprehend. This feeling grew stronger as he flipped through the pages of his ancestor's diary, where a device capable of influencing temporal patterns was mentioned. Reflecting on this, John began to notice the seemingly random coincidences around him. Every event in the house seemed to happen for a reason, whether it was a shadow on the wall or a sound echoing from the past. Everything pointed to the fact that their lives were closely intertwined. He remembered how, as a child, he often had strange dreams about a place much like this one. Those dreams had seemed meaningless to him, but now he realized they were a reflection of something much more significant. With each passing moment, John felt more and more that his ancestors had managed to create something unique, a way to peer beyond the boundaries of time. He stood on the verge of uncovering what had caused this displacement. With the help of the device he had found in the library, invisible lines of connection between different times began to open up before him. He still didn't know exactly how it would work, but he was determined to find out. John realized that if he could use the device correctly, he might not only return to his own time, but perhaps even rewrite the history of his life. He was faced with a choice, to trust his instincts or to follow the clues left by his ancestors. At that moment, John realized that he wasn't just trapped in time, he had become a part of it. And it was up to him to decide how these invisible threads would weave into his destiny. John, holding in his hands the device that could be his key to returning, realized he was almost out of time. Every moment spent in this strange temporal vortex took him further away from the life he once knew. He didn't know exactly how the device worked, but his ancestors' journal spoke of a place of power where the currents of time intersected. He had to get there to have a chance at activating the mechanism. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridors of the house as he hurriedly searched for the right place. The journal mentioned that the center of the temporal intersections was in the old garden behind the house, the very place that had once been his refuge. John dashed out the back door and made his way along the overgrown path, passing thick bushes and trees that seemed to watch him with silent understanding. At last, he stopped in the center of the garden, where a strange energetic aura seemed to mesmerize the space. John could feel the air vibrating around him and, trembling, he activated the device. At first, nothing happened, but a moment later, he was surrounded by a flash of light, and then everything around him changed. The space spun around him, and for a moment, John felt as if he had been pushed out, beyond the bounds of time and space. However, staying focused, he instinctively adjusted the device, keeping himself at the center of the vortex. He didn't know how long it would last, but his will was unshakable. Suddenly, there was a sense of elusive balance, as if every link in the chain had come together as one. Soon the vortex began to subside, leaving John in the familiar surroundings of his home. At that moment, he realized that his efforts had been successful. He had returned. Now he had to carefully consider how to use this knowledge and experience to make his life more meaningful. Back in his own time, John felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. His home seemed to be just as he remembered it. He looked around and saw familiar things in their places, as if the whole journey had been nothing but a dream. But there was no room for doubt. He still held in his hands the device that had helped him return. It served as a reminder that this had not been just an illusion. He quickly realized that his return had brought consequences. The temporal distortions caused by his journey had left their mark on the present. John noticed that some details of his surroundings had changed. A new photo was hanging on the wall. In it, he was with his now real family, one he hadn't even known about before. This indicated that the timelines had intertwined, bringing changes into his life. The events of his journey had set off a chain of changes, and John understood that he was now responsible for them. He started checking the local news and noticed that some events he remembered differently had unfolded in another way. This was confirmation that his actions had truly affected the current state of affairs. John realized the importance of keeping the device a secret. He decided to hide it in a safe place until he figured out what to do next. Gradually, he was getting used to the new reality, trying to figure out how to live with the awareness that his past and future were closely intertwined. Now he faced a difficult task: how to use the knowledge he had gained to better understand his own life and help those around him. Ideas kept swirling in his mind about how to avoid new temporal distortions and how to find his way in a changed world.